Welcome to another exciting episode of the Business Bourbon and Cigars podcast. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have an incredible show lined up for you. We're diving into the Amazon growth principles that are literally hidden in plain sight in the Jeff Bezos share owner letters. I want you to imagine for a second what your business could learn from literally one of the greatest business minds of our time. Plus, we're going to explore and we're going to dive into the high velocity decision making, which is key to moving fast and growing big. But before we dive in, I've got a favor to ask you. Please make sure you subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com and visit and subscribe our YouTube channel, Me Plus Ultra Network. That way you can stay updated with all our latest content and episodes. Our guest today is Steve Anderson. He is a true expert when it comes to strategic risk and business growth. He's the author of the international bestseller, The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon. His insights have helped countless businesses, entrepreneurs, unlock their true growth potential. Steve and I share a mutual interest, and that's when it comes to the innovative principles that drive business success. His depth and his knowledge, his passion for helping others achieve greatness is truly inspiring. Steve, welcome to the Business Bourbon and Cigars podcast.
Scott, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Look forward to our conversations.
I'm excited about this. I have to confess, and I read a lot of books. I feel like I'm always trying to learn, continuous learning. I did not know your book existed, and shame on me. But I didn't even know.
And maybe shame on me for some marketing stuff, but you know.
But as I went through it, I can't wait to share this stuff with the audience because, and I love how you've broken this down. But before we get into all that, share a little bit about your background and how you became an expert specifically in strategic risk and business growth.
Well, that really came out of my decades-long now work in the insurance industry, independent insurance agent, so selling insurance to consumers and businesses, and really developed over the years. So early in my career, worked in agencies, then shifted in the late 90s to actually consulting with those organizations on technology. And again, think about the late 90s, early 2000s, lots going on, internet, websites, social media, kind of a little bit later. Everybody was trying to figure out what to do. So that was my niche that I focused on, understood the operational side, and then really self-taught the technology side. And that really is what led me to start thinking about really the intersection of technology and risk-taking. And I started asking the question, is the biggest risk businesses face actually not taking enough risk? Which, again, coming out of the insurance industry is kind of anathema, right? Because everything we do is to reduce risk, mitigate risk, or transfer risk to an insurance policy. But what if risk-taking was a key to growing your business? So that started, we can talk about the kind of the research I started doing and forming ideas around that. But that was the original thought and idea and kind of my background then in risk-taking. And I don't tell most people this, but I even have a master's in insurance law. So it's been a decade-long study and deep dive into risk management, risk-taking, insurance, and all things related.
It's interesting. I love what you just said. The biggest risk is potentially no risk. So first off, let me apologize for my voice. I literally did a fire walk last night, and to walk through those hot coals, you've got to get yourself in a peak state. And for me personally, I was hollering a lot and really getting it there, so I'm a little hoarse.
Okay.
I practice what I preach on the personal development. But one of the repetitive things that were coming up with, and these business owners in this room, several billionaires, but there was a reoccurring theme that they eventually had to overcome. And when you talk about risk, it's easy to sit there and think of the small business, the newer entrepreneur that might be a little more conservative, afraid to take the risk. But there's there's a flip side to that as well. Someone that has grown their business to a very high level, or maybe have achieved levels of success that they did not anticipate when they first started off, as an entrepreneur or in their business career. And now they don't think they have comfort zones, but they do. And they take less risk because they don't want to lose what they have.
I totally agree. And that really is the concept behind the risk-taking necessary. And we can talk more about this, but one of my principles is believe it's always day one. And in that research I started doing, I actually looked at businesses that were once very successful, top of their game, well-known, we know the names, and they're gone. Why? Yeah. I think it was exactly what you just said. They start protecting what got them there, not looking at how do I invent what's next. And I do think that's one of the significant differences at Amazon. And one of the things that Bezos built into the culture of Amazon as he was building the company.
It's great stuff. I mean, what inspired you to write the Bezos letters? How'd you go down that path?
So as I was doing the research, and again, like I just said, lots of companies that are no longer here, once very successful. Why? Other companies continue to be successful. Why? And so that's where I started kind of trying to figure out. Came across Amazon. I kind of say now, obviously, but at the time it wasn't. And found the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos wrote. Starting in 1997 was the first one. The last one we covered in the book was 2018. He subsequently wrote 2019, 2020 before he stepped aside as CEO. And what I realized is that there were threads through those letters. So I literally sat down over a couple of days and read every single letter available in order, and started realizing these were different than most CEO written shareholder letters, because he did talk about Amazon and talk about growth and what they were doing well. But what really caught my attention is he talked about more how they did it. What were the things that allowed them to grow? And those were the threads that I started seeing throughout the letters. So I was really intrigued. My first, I call it iteration, was a white paper, 1-page executive summary for each of the letters that were available, highlights of what they did, key quotes, and some takeaways that I think could apply to businesses. Pretty excited about it. I was giving it away as a lead gen. Give me your email address. I'll send you this thing. Right. You can read it, kind of condensed it. And fortunately, my wife is in the book business and has been for many years. So I was talking to her about it, kind of excited about, what I put together, showed it to her. She sent it to the founder of the publication company she works for. They both immediately came back and said, this is a book, not a white paper. And I went, oh, shit.
Well, first off, I love the title and the subtitle, right? I mean,
there might have been some strategy, in picking that.
Yeah, I hope so. All right. So why do you, if as an expert in risk taking, why do you consider Jeff Bezos such a master at risk taking?
From the very early, so again, I'll go back to that very first 1997 letter, and it really did set the foundation for Amazon and what would happen subsequently. But he had really three primary sections there. One of those was long-term thinking. And I think this is where he started realizing that One, remember 1997, the internet was brand new. Nobody knew anything about the internet. Most people called it a fad. It's not going to be around, blah, 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 right? Kind of a little bit corollary to today with generative AI, et cetera. But what he said there is we will make decisions based on long-term growth, not short-term gain. And he did that. And he also said, if you are an investor that are looking for just those short-term, don't buy our stock because we are investing for the long term. And I think
that would have been a mistake.
Yeah. But think about most people, and again, Wall Street expectations are quarterly earnings. Yeah. And Bezos pretty much didn't play into that game and took a lot of heat in those early days, early years, for that. But he was thinking about risk taking really early on. The other piece there from, again, the foundation of Amazon is experimentation and invention. So I see, again, based on what he put together, that as a business, you have to be continually experimenting. And if you're going to do that, experiments fail. Yep. What Bezos says is, if you're doing an experiment and it's not going to fail, it's not an experiment. So you have to be willing as a company and a culture to bear the failures that are inevitable in order to get to the big ideas. So my first principle is encourage successful failure. And again, this is a culture thing. And I'm convinced, I say this in the book, I'm convinced that employees aren't afraid of failure, but they are afraid of the consequences of failure. And that's that negative culture in a company that squashes ideas, not brings them forward to see, okay, what can these do?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You've just hit literally on, I think, all three of a lot of themes that we've been hitting through our Me Plus Ultra mastermind group. And then we do, same name as the podcast, we do Business Bourbon and Cigars leadership retreats, and we do those every March and September, and those are in person. Mm-hmm. Literally, the last event in Scottsdale just this past March, every theme that went through our mastermind sessions was all about building a culture of accountability. And of course, we're always pushing innovation. And 100% with what you just said is main talking. I feel like you're reading bullet points. And I've got a question I want to ask you next, because you talk a lot, or I should say in the book, you talk a lot about being client obsessed rather than customer focused. Mm-hmm. So literally, we just put out an ebook on client centricity, mm-hmm. and our next event in September is going to be the theme of that is client. So I really want to focus in on this, okay. And get your input on this, because I would love to think I'm a genius and thought we timed this show to perfection, but that is not the case. I'm looking at it and think, wow, this is perfect timing. So talk to us, explain the difference and why it's crucial between client obsession and customer focused.
So back to that 1997 letter. One other section, so we talked about long-term thinking. One other section was, we will obsess over customers. Those are Bezos' words, not mine. And that's great. It really stood out to me because you don't often see the word obsess used in business. Nope. And that's, when I say customer focus, customer journey, customer service, right, all of those things are different than obsessing over customers. And in fact, if you look at the word obsess, that can have negative consequences, like you're too obsessed with. And my question to business owners is, can you be too obsessed with your customers? Maybe, but I don't think so. And it's a different level. And again, here's how Bezos thinks about it. If you know your customers' wants, needs, and desires so deeply that you can invent on their behalf. Now, what that means to me is they don't know they need it until you can understand their problems, the friction, the stopping points. Early example at Amazon, early 2000s. Online shopping started building, right? We started getting used to that. And those early days, if you remember, it was a lot of friction. Yep. One of the friction points was I had to put my information in every time. I had to put credit card, I had to put shipping, I had to put, all of that information. Amazon invented one-click shopping. Now, I say that because it was so unique, they actually received a patent on the process. And that patent expired 17 years later, just a few years ago, to the point that Apple licensed that technology so they could do it on their website. Barnes & Noble tried to copy it. Amazon sued them and won. And so, Again, you think about, okay, that's customer obsession. What are the friction points in your business? And I would challenge business owners at this point to say, you probably don't know. Have you literally gone through as a customer and experienced what your customers are experiencing with whatever product, service, platform, however they interact with you? Do you actually understand where their friction points are? That's so, again, their wants, needs, and desires so deeply. That's the difference that we can invent on their behalf.
So I want to get into some actionable tips that we can, like our audience can take and start integrating, right? And I think it comes in two forms. One, how do you get such deep knowledge of what are the tips actionable tips that people can do to really start getting that level of deep knowledge about their clients or prospects? And then two, once we have that information and that data, what do we do? How do we, what's the steps? What are some of the tips that we can do to start taking action on them?
So one thing comes immediately to mind, which is go see your customers.
Yeah.
Don't do focus groups. Because again, customers don't know what they want if they don't know what's available. So you're trying to find out their pain points so you can invent a solution for them. And Amazon does a lot of customer research, and they physically go. So it's not, it's not even in early days, but even now, I don't think it's, Zoom calls. I think it's physically going to see and spending some time understanding them and their process, what they do. And again, this applies, business to consumer or business to business. I think both have equal. The other thing is do secret shoppers, meaning have somebody who doesn't know your business actually go through the process and write down what happens and the points and their feelings of working with you. And I think most business owners would be surprised because my experience is most business owners have no idea what goes on day to day, especially as they get bigger in their operation. And one of the things Bezos, one other thought, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
Bezos required senior leadership to be on the customer service lines at least, I think, once a quarter originally. So they were actually taking customer service calls, and shipping didn't. I literally just had an experience with Amazon. I ordered something, it didn't show up, and I kept getting notices, deliveries delayed. I finally got a notice saying, we think it's lost. So you can cancel it and reorder it. And I did get it, right? So, but again, being proactive, offering that option to me, not waiting for me to have to go and ask for help.
I have to tell you, I love the one button approach to them. You brought it up in your example of eliminating friction. I love I don't even have to add it to my cart.
Right.
I just hit the button and it arrives in a day or two, and it's just awesome. So that's a great example of everybody talks client experience.
Yes.
Everybody talks it, but very few people live it. And I'm sitting here and I'm toying with this idea. AI done correctly, let's just say ChatGPT, can really make us more efficient in a lot of ways. And so, depending on the business you're in, and I'd love your thoughts on this, depending on the business you're in, a lot of them have a lot of reviews. Many of them, most of them are positive, right? And then there's the negatives. But within those reviews are gold. They're telling us exactly what they love, and in some instances telling us where the friction points are, what they hate. And we have the ability now to take. So I own 3 car dealerships. So I'm about to do this. What I'm saying. So I guess I'm going to get some free consulting advice from you on this.
There you go. I'm ready.
So I'm going to take those reviews and I'm going to put them in. And I'm going to put them into a Word doc, and then I'm going to cut and paste that and put it into ChatGPT. And what I'm going to ask it to do is, because it can do a couple things depending on my prompts, I'm going to first tell it to tell me exactly all the things that the most common things, the top 10 things that my clients love the most. Then I'll have it drilled down to the top 3, right? What do they love most about us? Then, what do they want to avoid? What are the things we don't do well? But I'm going to take this a step further, because I'm going to take my competitors' negative reviews and positive reviews, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm not going to limit it to my own client base, because as I put in all these negative things of all these stores, because I might only be doing certain things wrong at my stores, but when I start putting in 10, 20 stores, right, and there's a common theme to us as auto dealers, we stink at this, right? I can then have ChatGPT start to give me ideas on what is a better way to articulate, or at least get my brain started on, this is where your clients want to go. This is what they're trying to avoid. And what's beautiful about ChatGPT, it can even put it in their voice. So I'm speaking their language, right? The way they want to talk it, instead of the fluff and crap that comes in typical branding and marketing messages. So what are talk to me about that. What do you think of that?
So I don't want to, we don't need to go down this rabbit trail, but I've been spending a lot of time on Gen AI. So for me, that's kind of the AI. It's too big. Gen AI, absolutely. And again, my audience with insurance agents, I've actually showed them exactly how to do that. And you're right. Is you live in, honestly, you don't even need to put it into Word doc. I mean, you might want to get as many of them as you can, but you literally can just select a web page with all those reviews, paste it into a prompt. Now, I would say the key there is engineering your prompt correctly. So, there's some frameworks, and I don't want to go into training on prompting, but most people's mistake with Gen AI tools, ChatGPT or Claude, or any of them, is their prompts are too short. They're not explaining enough. And when you think about it, those GPTs have billions of words in their database. You need to help them narrow down what they're thinking about into a small piece. And I want to echo what you said. Now you have words, and I absolutely agree. Do your competitors, because now you have words about what they do well and what they don't do well. And now you don't have to call them out, but you can say, here's how we've solved this problem for our customers. Yeah. Here's how we handle these situations, now that you know where the negatives are.
That's right. I love
right?
it.
No,
Yeah. So
totally agree. With exactly what you said in the process you're thinking of.
you talk a lot and teach a lot about Amazon's client experience pillars.
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
So there are three, and they have been unchanged for quite a while now. So wide selection, low prices, fast delivery. And Bezos says in one of his letters, we don't believe customers will ever want less selection, higher prices, and slower delivery. And so that's what we focus on. And again, if you look at Amazon over the years, they've invested billions and billions of dollars in all of that, right? And I would say typically Amazon has low prices. Do they have the lowest all the time? Probably not. Are they consistently lower? Probably.
Yeah.
We know wide selection, the everything store. And it's almost hard now to go to a retail store if I'm looking for something because I don't know if they have it in stock. I don't know if they have the brand I want. If I go on Amazon, now the problem actually, and I think this is where Gen AI may help Amazon, the problem is they have such a wide selection, it's hard to narrow down to the one I think will work best for me.
Yeah.
And then we talk about fast delivery. And that's a whole other piece.
So how can with those three pillars, how can a small business implement them? But and I'm asking this because everybody wants to improve their client experience, right? So how can a small business implement these pillars to do that? And I specifically, right, when I sit there and say wide selection, I mean, sometimes if you're a franchise, you're limited to the selection
right.
of what that
You don't
franchise
have a
offers,
choice.
right? And so does it have to be those three pillars, or like what's your thoughts on this?
So
Help us
one, I
walk us through
don't
this.
think it has to be those three pillars.
Okay.
Two, what are your pillars? Do you even know? What are you hanging your hat on as a business? And maybe it's luxury pricing, not cheapest pricing.
Right.
That could, I mean, again, it depends on your business, but do you understand and have you thought through what your pillars are?
It's interesting because I think the key is in what you said earlier when you mentioned Jeff Bezos, is we don't believe these will ever change. So in your business, what won't change, right?
Right.
And then the pillars go around that.
And then your focus now becomes how do we improve those pillars?
Yeah, yeah. So you talk a lot about high velocity decision making in the book.
Yeah.
All right. Explain Bezos's two main types of decisions and how they can contribute to rapid growth.
So one of the things that happens as businesses grow and start scaling is they tend to add layers of bureaucracy. So think about, and it may not be, a huge business, but you then, start having managers and supervisors and whatever those layers are, you think you need to add those layers in. What Bezos says, however, is that when you put those barriers in decision making, it actually slows down growth. So he describes two types of decisions, uncreatively, type 1 and type 2. Okay. Type 1 decisions are what I call bet the farm decisions. They're big decisions, huge impact on the company, should be made slowly with as much data as you can get, and probably ends up being a gut final, here's what we should do. And those decisions are hard to reverse. Once you're down that path, they're hard to reverse. Bezos says those you do slowly. And very few decisions in a business are type 1.
Yeah.
Most decisions are type 2. easily reversible, make a decision with I think this is a key phrase, at most 70% of the information you wish you had. And I love that phrasing. That's his phrasing. 70% of the information you wish you had, and speed is essential. Those type 2 decisions, and he describes them as doors. You walk through that door and a type 2, you look around, you don't like what you see, you change your mind. You either pivot or literally walk back, cancel the decision. It's not that consequential. And a corollary to that is those decisions should be made by a small team, not a big team. And so that the underlying idea there is you hire the best. If you hire the best, you let them make decisions for what you hired them for. And he gives an example, and this illustrates another principle. But he gives an example of the Prime Video team wanted to greenlight a new show for Amazon Prime. And he didn't think it was going to work. Bezos, they were pitching him. He didn't think it was going to work. And he ended up saying, I disagree and commit. And what that means is, I don't think you're making the right decision. But if that's the decision you think is best, I've hired you because of your expertise. I fully commit to supporting you any way I can in that decision. And here's what he said. Think how much time would have been wasted them trying to convince me they're right. Let's just do it and find out. It's not, it wasn't going to sink the company.
Well,
regardless.
And plus he gets to say, I told you so if it doesn't. No.
Exactly. Or they get to say, I told you so.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So I like the reason I want to talk about what I'm going to ask next. You talk about the 4 key growth cycles with testing, building, accelerating, and scaling. Man, when you talk to entrepreneurs, scaling is always I don't know, an issue, sometimes a challenge, barrier, whatever it might be.
It's hard, right?
Oh, yeah. So walk us through those 4 key, cycles.
So really where those came about is 14 principles are a lot, okay? And so I wanted to help people be able to contextualize them. So the 4 cycles I believe every business is going through, big, small. Could be a department, could be a region, and within a larger business, these cycles are happening. So you're testing, that's encourage successful failure, bet on big ideas, dynamic invention, and innovation. So 3 principles there. You're testing the ideas, you're seeing what works. You see some success in 1 or 2 ideas, you start building it. Assess over customers, apply long-term thinking, etc. After that, you start accelerating based on what you learned there. And again, high velocity, how do you keep speed in the business, in decision making and movement forward? And then scale is, think about Amazon. 1.32 million employees worldwide. How do you keep the culture that Bezos created when he had 10, 60, 100, 200, 1,000 employees with 1 million? How do you scale that? Well, again, 4 principles there. Culture, maintain your culture. Focus on high standards, and that's where that principle links back to decision making. If we don't hire just to fill a position, if we hire based on the standards we have as a company, then we'll be able to grow faster. And then data measuring. But what's interesting there, Amazon's a huge data company. They measure everything. But here's part of what he said. Measure what matters, question what's measured. So you're always making sure you're measuring the right thing, and ultimately trust your gut. So here's an example of that, talking about reviews. they would look at reviews, and actually Bezos published his email address in, I don't remember what year now, one of the shareholder letters, and said, send me an email. And he started monitoring early on. He stopped that after a while, but had a team monitoring those emails. And if they found 2, 3, 4 emails talking about a similar topic, that got brought to his attention. He sent an email to whoever was head of that whatever department or group or whatever, and said, find out what's wrong here. That's trust your gut. Data's telling us we're doing okay, but something's not right because customers are telling us something different. And the customer view, even if it's a small number, probably indicates there's a problem somewhere that we're not recognizing. So that, and then the final principle there is it's always day one. And people ask me what's my favorite principle. I think it's probably that one. Although I really like encourage successful failure. But, and again, all these principles stand on their own and they all interact with one another. So
I don't know. I always write these things down. I never know why I do it because we're recording, and so
well, there is something about writing that kind of.
I remember it better.
Yeah.
But and not only that, with AI, it can transcribe it for us.
Yes.
So I mean, it's like. So let me ask you this: we all talk about how like businesses don't, or even people don't. Maybe they don't think big enough, right? But you have a philosophy that you think people will never grow big enough if they aren't willing to risk failure. And you've talked a little bit about this. Let's dive deep on that.
Okay.
All right. So explain that. What do you mean by that?
Well, and I think it's successful failure. And again, that those two words aren't generally put together. So that's interestingly unique. And actually, that phrase, and I write about this in the book, came from the Apollo 13 mission. And again, I won't go too deep, or you can ask more questions, but the Apollo program, I'm a huge space nut as a kid and growing up, so I followed it closely. Apollo 1 was a test, and that was when the 3 astronauts were killed because of a fire in the capsule and really rocked NASA to its core. And it really required them to retool, rethink, et cetera, et cetera. Apollo 13, so landed on the moon, Apollo 11, great success. Apollo 12 went back. Apollo 13 was kind of like, okay, yeah, we've done that. People weren't quite that interested until about 51 hours into the mission, a oxygen tank blew out the side of the service module, and all of a sudden, a routine mission became life and death. Long story there. Ron Howard's movie, actually a pretty accurate prediction of what happened there. What caught me at the end of that movie, though, was they had splashed down, all alive, getting off the helicopter on the deck of the Iwo Jima aircraft carrier, and Tom Hanks, who played Jim Lovell, the commander, is narrating in the background, and he says, "Our mission became known as NASA's most successful failure." Failure because we didn't get to the moon. Successful because we all got back alive. And in my research, several people said, without the failure of Apollo 1, it's unlikely Apollo 13 would have been the success. And so let me bring that to Amazon. Amazon constantly has failures. That's part of their culture. And I would say that's unique for most businesses.
Yeah.
One of their biggest failures, I think, was in 2014, Jeff Bezos announced a phone, an Amazon phone called the Fire Phone. Well, kind of like, and his pet project, he really pushed this. He wanted a phone. But we already had iPhones from 2007. We already had Android phones. People had already picked who they were or what they wanted. Why would Amazon have a phone? Why would anybody want an Amazon phone? It made shopping on Amazon a little easier, but that was not that big a deal. Eventually tried to sell the phone, eventually gave it away for 1 cent with a contract, couldn't give it away. End of 2014, they wrote off $180 million in development and inventory costs. Failure.
Yeah.
Pretty big failure. What's the success? 4 months after the Fire Phone was announced, Bezos got his first demonstration of coming from the same group, of a cylinder that could sit on a table that you could talk to.
Yeah.
And it would respond. The Echo device and Alexa, the machine learning background or voice that would listen and then respond. Well, I think we can say that has become somewhat of a success, right? And so so the question is, what do you learn from the failures? And I always want to emphasize to people listening, this is not who cares. Let's just throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. This is intentional. It's strategic. It's thought through. And one of the tools they use, which I think is fascinating, is what originally was called a 6-page memo. Now it's more likely called the working backwards document. Again, back to our customer obsession, working backwards from the customer to. But the working backward document, Bezos in 2004 banned PowerPoint at Amazon. Any meeting could not be a slide-oriented presentation. What he required instead was a written memo. And it kind of went through various iterations, what became then a maximum of 6 pages, starting with a future press release, the actual press release when the product idea, whatever, was released, customer-centric, and then FAQs. What are all the questions that people are going to think of, and what are our answers? We've already researched answers. That is not sent out before the meeting. Everybody comes to the conference room. That physical memo is handed out. The first 15, 30 minutes, could be, depending on how big the decision is, are spent everybody reading the memo. And then what happens? Everybody literally is on the same page. So now you're not interrupting with, hey, what about this question? Oh, that's the next 3 slides down. None of that. Everybody has read it. They've made maybe notes of additional questions they might have, and now it's open for discussion. And it's a much richer experience. So I did this. This is not just theory for me. So I started a new company 4 years ago. Kind of long story, but I was pitching a group of association executives to invest in the company. I did a 6-page memo, and it was an excruciating 20 minutes while they were sitting and reading. And I was trying to see what notes they were taking and all of those kinds of things. And the discussion was richer, more pointed, and it's the idea of slowing down to speed up. Now, if the failure happens, now we have a document to go back to and said, okay, what didn't we understand that we should have understood? What did we think was going to happen that didn't? So now we can look at the failure and try to understand why it happened and how we can prevent it in the future.
Yeah, sometimes you got to give yourself, when you say slow down, you got to give yourself permission to disconnect a little bit and spend more time on it than in it, whatever the situation, challenge, the business, whatever it might be. Let me ask you this question. What's your most successful failure?
I haven't been asked that question before. I got to think about that.
When you said it, I said, I'm asking this question every single podcast from this point forward.
What's my most successful failure? And I'd have to think about that some more. So I don't know that I can give you an answer. The answer I'm thinking of right now is actually that white paper that never got published. So I don't call that a failure. That might be just a step to success for the book. I would say, well, and I mean, honestly, Scott, the book, I had no idea that the book would be as popular as it continues to be. I mean, that's just astounding to me. And that's really, I will think, now you got me thinking about that. I will think about that some more.
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Success leaves clues, right? And what I love about your book, I mean, think about how long ago Think and Grow Rich was written, right? There's not a thing in there that doesn't, other than the fact that they talk about it all being men, all right, just, and no women allowed in business, basically. Not allowed, but not in it, I guess. Everything from this, what makes people and businesses successful in that book, apply today. And so you've got an evergreen book in the sense that a lot of what he did, the principles and the strategies, this works. Apply it. and what it doesn't mean you're going to become, one of the largest companies in the world, but my gosh, what happens if you become 10 to 20 times larger than what you are, and so, or it makes it easier to grow, whatever it might be. I think about for us, when you said it, I'm thinking, man, what's my most successful failure? And so, and two things come to my mind. So I have trouble deciphering between the two, but one, when we created a software tool that really was meant to help our marketing efforts I have a digital marketing agency, and we're not a software company. All right. But it helped us learn. For one, it brought us back and made us understand the importance of, we need to stay focused on what we're great at. All right. So that was one thing. But we also learned a lot of things by doing that on how our marketing could become better and what our clients were wanting, but more importantly for them, what their clients were wanting. And then the other example I'd give, and man, when we pivoted from doing, 2009, 10, 11, when we started doing a full pivot to digital marketing, because we've always been direct response. So, a lot of that, obviously, before internet, was direct mail. And so when we moved into paid media and whether it's social ads and search ads and all that, I did a horrible job. I failed our team. Our culture changed. And because I did not understand, I didn't have enough empathy for the change, the impact of the change on our team, specifically our sales team, right? And because they had done so well for so long selling this, and this was not just a selling, but what happened was this was a longer selling. We were moving to a longer selling cycle that involved multiple decision makers. And a lot of times the decision maker, because they didn't understand digital marketing, was relying on someone that in the past we never talked to. And so we had to learn that process. And there's a lot of things I would do different. And I've learned, and some of the decisions I make today, I reflect based on that experience. So I love that you brought that up. And hopefully every single person listened to that and started going back in their own head. What is my most successful failure?
Well, and I think I think what I would say, reflecting a little bit, is in the 90s, I worked for an insurance agency in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as a salesperson. And I had always thought I was a good salesperson. And that 8 years really showed I really wasn't. And so failure there, didn't do very well. Success, and that's what pushed me probably even more into the technology piece, which is where my career for the last 30 years now has been. And so that's the success, being able to take the knowledge I had and do something different with it. And again, I'm in that niche. I'm very well known, and that probably wouldn't have happened without that failure there in the 90s of, as I could still be trying to knock it out as a salesperson and probably been miserable. Now I'm having fun.
So a lot of people will say the concept of the flywheel, right, would be Amazon's secret weapon. So first off, there's probably a lot of people in the audience that don't even know what that is. So let's explain that first, but then explain how they could possibly create their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the backstory on that is the concept of the flywheel comes from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. It's actually chapter 8. It's called The Flywheel and the Doom Loop. And it, again, you probably have that book on your shelf somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Reread chapter 8. I will just say that. That book was published in October of 2001. I'm pretty sure my dates remember correctly. Jim Collins was invited by Jeff Bezos to a senior team offsite meeting in August 2001, just before the book was published. They spent a whole day just talking about the flywheel. So the concept of the flywheel is, what's your main focus? So for Amazon, it was growth. Again, 2000, Bezos felt very strongly, kind of the Wild West. You got to build and get land while you can, the first mover advantage and all of those kinds of things. So they were focused entirely on growth, scale, etc. So that's the focus. But what are the inputs to make that focus actually work? And so they came away that day with literally a drawing of a flywheel with growth in the middle and the other inputs on the outside. They called it the virtual loop. And it was customer centricity. So the better our website is, the more customers will come because it's easier.
Yep.
The more customers that come allows us to have more negotiating power with manufacturers so we can offer lower pricing. Lower pricing brings more customers. And so you can kind of see as all of that. And then they added kind of a side piece in 2001 called Amazon Marketplace, which was the craziest business idea ever, which was, we're going to allow our competitors to sell on our site. Crazy. Who thinks about that? Kind of like you have car dealership. It's kind of like, well, let that dealer across the street come and bring his cars over here. It's like, what?
We'd rather go bring our cars over there.
Yes, exactly. But again, here's what Bezos said with that, and the longer story on how it came about. But here's what he said. If a third-party seller has inventory that we don't have, it's better for the customer. If they have a price that's lower than we can offer, it's better for the customer. And if it's better for the customer, it will ultimately be better for Amazon. And
thinking long term.
Thinking long term. And because they had built the infrastructure, these small businesses could pay Amazon a fee to access all of that. Fulfillment, shipping, Prime, storage, all of that. And they didn't have to build it. And so literally millions of small businesses use the Amazon platform now as their fulfillment because they don't have to build all of that. So that's the fly. And so again, as more customers come, that just keeps that flywheel moving. Now, the interesting thing about a flywheel is it's really, you think about big metal, old factories had the flywheel that was turning all the stuff. It's hard to get it going. Once you get it going, though, it takes constant input, but less effort. I would say the problem with the flywheel is if any one of those pieces don't function properly, it affects everything. And so that can be a problem. Here's what I'll say about that principle. I think it's the hardest to understand and to implement, but maybe the most important for a business.
Chapter 8, good to great. All right. So make sure everybody out there listening or watching, go back to that book. A lot of the business leaders I know have probably read that. But you said something here that is a nice segue for what I want to ask. When you mentioned the third-party people selling on their sites and things like that, how do you feel like strategic partnerships, collaborations contribute to a company's ability to grow? I mean, obviously it helps Amazon. And I got to tell you, I go to Amazon, and we'll come back right to that question. I go to, we talked about lower pricing. I don't even go to Amazon for lower pricing because as some of these third-party people come in, they're not always lower. But I do it for my number one thing is it always saves me time and effort. And if I were to factor in the cost of my time to go buy somewhere else or to whatever, try to search and find it somewhere else, there's a cost to that. That's not, you're not seeing the hard dollars, but it's there. And so I do that. But let's go back to this strategic partnerships and collaborations. How do you think the other businesses should I guess, use that lever?
Well, I think it's an option that can be considered if that strategic partner or a collaboration piece, is good for both parties. I do think kind of the win-win idea is key there. And I think that with Marketplace, it can be a win for small businesses. There certainly are some that complain about the fee that Amazon charges. And I kind of don't understand that because go build it yourself. If you don't want to pay Amazon, go build it yourself.
Exactly.
I don't. I mean, why is Amazon responsible for? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting off on a little bit of a rant there.
You're 100%. They not only are they building the infrastructure, but they've got all the traffic.
They got all the traffic. Yeah.
You're not having to do any of that.
Good luck building it yourself. So that I don't understand, but
yeah.
And a lot of people have been very successful, utilizing that service. So I think again, but I strategically, one, test it, try and do something small that's not huge, find out how it works, and then scale from there. Again, the whole idea, test, build, accelerate, and scale, it's a process that you can start with to find out how it's going to work and how well it's going to work by starting small and building and scaling from there.
So I did a live stream. I think it was Tuesday. Kevin Smith from Dynatron. He's the president of Dynatron. And I asked him this question because they do an incredible job getting referrals. A third of their pitches, presentations, deals come from affiliates. So these are strategic alliances, collaborations. And to your point, and I think this is kind of where Amazon, you kind of mentioned it with Amazon's thing. We tend as business leaders, and I think when we come in thinking, I will pay you this to sell my product and or to do this or that, when we think of it initially as financial only upfront, that goes to the short-term think, right? That thinks short-term. Whereas Amazon's saying, yeah, all right, we'll let competitors come in, put their products on it because we know long-term that benefits our company and because it benefits our client. So it goes back to the client obsession. And what Kevin was saying, he goes, we quickly learned that, the financial thing, some people think that's important, but that's not what the relationships work. And I think of all the businesses that buy into, I need to do some strategic alliances. We need to collaborate better, but then those relationships rarely work out. And I think it's because it's so focused on the money. And quite honestly, I don't have time to worry about repping other people's products for a financial. I make more money when I rep my own. However, if outside of the money, it saves me time, effort, it makes my products, like in Amazon's case, the client experience more valuable, easier, better. Now that is something I can't duplicate on my own. I can't just get paid for and forget about it. Now now it's a true partnership. And so I loved what you said there, because I think there's a lot of businesses out there would like to have great alliances, great affiliates, great collaborations. They don't know how to do it, or they're looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, and a thought that comes to mind is you were talking is with marketplace sellers, they better treat Amazon's customers as Amazon would treat them.
Mm-hmm.
Or Amazon has no tolerance. They'll cut them off. You know, if they get too many negative feedback on product, service, how they handle it. So, you know, that's, I think, how Amazon controls. And the last numbers available, 68% of the products sold on Amazon.com are third-party sellers.
Yeah.
So it's
a great point.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, where can the audience, where can Me Plus Ultra, where can Business Bourbon and Cigars, where can all these people connect with you, learn more about your work and the Bezos letters?
So the website for the book is thebezosletters.com. And so you can kind of reach me through that. Steve at the bezosletters.com. And social is LinkedIn's my primary platform. And so Steve Anderson Bezos or Steve Anderson Insurance, you should be able to find me there. If you want to connect with me, just let me know you listen to the podcast, and I'd be happy to.
That's great. Huge thank you to our guest, Steve Anderson, for joining us today, sharing his invaluable wisdom and his insights. Love your journey. I'm confident your expertise. I say this because I feel like it helped me. And so I know, everyone, I say this a lot. I just think everyone's like me. So I know if it helped me, it had to help everybody else. Right. So, but, a lot of actionable stuff you gave here. I took a lot of notes, and I don't normally do that. But the stuff you talked about can help transform a business to higher levels of success and prosperity. So really appreciate you coming on here and sharing all this with our audience today. If you want to connect, if you're out there and you want to connect with Steve, or download additional material that can help you apply the principles that are revealed in the Bezos Letters book, visit thebezosletters.com, as Steve had just mentioned. And remember, if you found this episode inspiring and informative, be sure to subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com and subscribe to the Me Plus Ultra Network on YouTube. Together, let's continue driving positive change and innovation in the world of business. Until next time, keep innovating and keep making a difference. Thank you, everyone.